All right, Chapter 7 Leadership in Groups and Teams. So, the beginning of the chapter starts with fundamentals of group interaction. The first of these is a common purpose or goal. Group members must have something that they want to accomplish together. So, obviously, between any group, there has to be some type of common goal amongst them. If it's your friends, common goal is to have fun. If it's work, common goal is to be successful, make money. There's also interdependence. The success of any member of the group depends on everyone doing his or her part. So each group member has a role. Each group member has a role that's crucial to the group purpose or goal, and the group depends on one another to attain the goal. There's also mutual influence. That is, the success of any member of the group depends on everyone doing his or her part, and there's also ongoing communication. Members must engage in regular or steady communication. This can be face-to-face communication or communication through other means such as phone calls, text messaging, emails. And there's a specific size. A group has to be more than 2 people, and they say that group size is between 3 to 20 people. That being a dyad, or a group of 2 people, remove 1, there's only 1 person. 3 people is definitely a group. So then there's group evolution. So the Tuckman model is groups of all types go through 4 phases. That's forming, which is when members are discovering what behaviors are acceptable and how much interdependence the group has. Storming, this phase is marked by conflict as members express their individuality and may resist the formation the group has. And then there's norming. Members begin to accept each other and develop norms or rules for interacting. There's performing, and that's when they begin to focus on addressing the assignment or the goal that they're trying to achieve. Then there's a 5th stage that was added later, which is adjourning, which is the completion of the task. Then Marshall Scott Poole argues that groups go through multiple stages of development. He suggests that at any given time, a group may be at one point in its social development and at another in its task development. And the important moments in these developments are called breakpoints, and they can involve naturally occurring topics, changes, or moments of delay or disruptions caused by conflict or failure. So the concept of group evolution has some critical elements. The first, timing is critical. Second, since groups take time to develop successfully, any attempt to rush a group's development is likely to meet with failure. Then effective groups are characterized by a high degree of cohesion and commitment. And fourth, evolution of groups suggests that group leadership also develops in stages or as a process. And then we move on into the theory of emergent leadership. This was brought forth by Ernest Borman, who came up with the method of residues. And this is when groups are basically choosing their leaders. And so when this happens, a group eliminates leader contenders until only one person is left, and the elimination occurs in 2 phases. First, those deemed unsuitable for leadership are quickly removed from contention. Unsuitable candidates may be too quiet or they are too rigid and aggressive. Then there's a competition stage, and during this stage, social relations are tense. Communication behaviors that lead to elimination include dominating other group members and talking too much, and this is when the contenders of the group, or the contenders to be leaders of the group, basically compete with one another to obtain leadership. Then there were the Minnesota studies, which found 4 major patterns. 1, ultimate winner recruits an ally/lieutenant who helps him or her win out over another strong contender. Second, each of the remaining contenders has a lieutenant, resulting in leadership struggle being prolonged or no strong leader emerges. Third, crisis determined leader emergence. And fourth, no one emerges as a clear leader. So then we move into how to not emerge as a leader. There's 8 rules to this. The first is being absent from as many group meetings as possible. And the first step to success is basically showing up every day. And so if you're not showing up, how can anyone depend on you? Second is if you contribute very little to the interaction. Obviously, that goes without saying. The leader is probably contributing the most to the group in any interaction. Third, if you volunteer to be the secretary or record keeper of your group's discussion, that's taking a secondary role to what's going on amongst the group discussions. The fourth is that if you indicate you are willing to do what you are told, basically that's showing that you are submissive. And then the fifth is if you come on too strong early in the group's competition, that shows overcompensation for some type of underlying issue that you may have. If you try to assume the role of Joker, obviously you're going to not be a leader. No, a Joker is basically worthless in the group. Rule 7 is you demonstrate your knowledge of everything. No one likes a know-it-all. And Rule 8 is if you demonstrate a contempt for leadership. If you're trying to be like a rebel of the group, obviously you're not going to be the leader. Useful strategies to becoming a leader are participate early and often, focus on communication quality as well as quantity, demonstrate your competence, and help build a cohesive unit. Then we move into leadership and meetings. This was, I thought, a pretty significant part of the chapter, being that I remember I've been in group meetings before that just were terrible. They didn't need to be, either that was because they were prolonged, they got dragged on forever, or they just didn't need to happen altogether. So the first step in leading meetings is determine if a meeting is necessary before calling people together. So the situations when a meeting needs to be called is if organizational goals need clarification, if you need to give information that may stimulate questions or discussion needs to be shared, if group consensus is required regarding a decision, if a problem needs to be discovered, analyzed, or solved, if an idea, program, or decision needs to be sold to others, if conflicts need to be resolved. Another is a meeting needs to happen if a number of different people have a similar understanding of the same idea, program, or decision. When you need to choose one path to take, it's important to weigh out all the different options. And then the last one is an idea, program, or decision is stalled. You need to have a meeting to get everything back up to speed. And then when not to call a meeting is if other communication networks such as telephone, video conference, email, letter, or memo will transmit the message just as effectively. If there's not sufficient time for adequate preparation by participants of the meeting leader, if one or more of the key participants is not available, and also if there are issues of personal or sensitive material that could be handled more effectively by talking with each person individually. And then to having a successful meeting, the first thing is you need to have a clear agenda. You need to know what you're going to talk about at the meeting, how you're going to talk about it, how you're going to space everything out. And in the book, they recommend dividing a meeting into thirds. So the first third is the warm-up phase. This is when announcements are made and items that are easy to decide are discussed. The second third is when you're getting down to, the thick of the fat of the meeting, and that's tackle the most difficult issues when group is at peak function. And then the third is cool down, address items that are up for discussion but not decision. It is important during the meeting to maintain focus on the agenda as well as the time limits throughout the meeting. And then the last part is they give us a guide of how to conduct the decision process. And meeting chairs need to manage ideas by putting them into the right context, considering the problems in the right order, setting and changing decision criteria, setting the appropriate pace, and crystallizing decisions. Also in a meeting, it's important to listen to others. You need to focus on the content of the message, not the speaker's delivery. Listen for ideas, not just facts. Don't let yourself get distracted. It is very important to be open-minded to a group meeting. If you're dismissing what everyone's saying, then there's no point in even having the meeting if you're not being willing to listen to each other. Also, you need to use your thought speed to your advantage. I thought this was very interesting when I read this, that we think from 4 to 20 times as fast as we speak. I remember in high school when I was studying to take the SATs, whenever I would talk out loud while doing math problems, like I would talk to myself as I was doing the problem, like be like stuff like add this and to that and then subtract this. I would do much better than when I just did it all in my head. And ever since then, even when I'm writing a paper now, I'll go in my room away from everyone else, so I'm not distracting anyone else when they're doing their assignments in my house, and then I'll talk myself through as I'm writing the paper. Another important part of the meeting is involving all participants. Effective meeting leaders encourage involvement of all participants. Basically, everyone needs to participate in the meeting. Everyone needs to come up with ideas, because if you keep your ideas to yourself because you're, afraid of being ridiculed or afraid of being dismissed, you could potentially forfeit the opportunity of having of you coming up with, a great idea that's going to help everyone. Another important thing is keeping a record. The written record serves as the group's memory. A written record should include when and where the meeting took place, the names of those attending, and the summary of the main points. And then another important part of a meeting is goal setting, which is outlining goals and objectives to clarify what the group wants to accomplish and addressing the problem. And then you go into identification of alternatives and evaluating the solutions. So a standard agenda then will identify the problem, analyze the problem, develop criteria, generate possible solutions, evaluate and select a solution, and implement a solution. Then we move into pitfalls. So one of the first pitfall we see, or first group of them, is signs of overconfidence. This is the illusion of invulnerability. Members are overly optimistic and prone to take extraordinary risks. Basically, right as soon as you think you're invincible is when you're going to be struck down. And then belief in the inherent morality of the group. Participants ignore the ethical consequences of their actions and decisions. This is basically when you go into the ends justify the means no matter what, and through that can lead to a disaster. Another pitfall is closed-mindedness. One sign of closed-mindedness is collective rationalism. This is when group members invent rationalizations to protect themselves from feedback that would challenge their assumptions. And then there's stereotypes of outside groups. Participants, and in these stereotypes, participants believe that members of other groups are evil, weak, or stupid. They underestimate the capabilities of others. I feel like stereotypes of outside groups, not only just meetings, is generally just bad, because a lot of the times you don't really understand someone or what someone is like until you sit down and get to know them. Like one thing on UK's campus, obviously Greek life is huge here, and I remember freshman year and even start of sophomore year, I would just hang out with people in my fraternity, and that was fun for a while and whatnot, and we would always feel like, oh no, we don't want to hang out with those kids because they're in another fraternity. And then now, senior year, everyone just kind of forgot that fraternities were even a thing. No one really cares about who's in what house and whatnot. And it's turned out I have a much bigger social circle now, and it's a lot of fun. Then another pitfall is signs of group pressure. There's pressure on dissenters. This is when members coerce dissenting members to go along with the prevailing opinion of the group. Self-censorship. This is when individuals keep their doubts about groups' decisions to themselves. There's the illusion of oh my god, that's a doozy to say. Unanimity, which is a group members mistakenly assume that the absence of conflicting opinions means that the entire group agrees on a course of action. And then there's self-appointed mind guards. These are group members that take it upon themselves to protect the leader from dissenting opinions that might disrupt the group's consensus. So all these things can lead to meetings not turning out successful. So it's important to remember that these things are real and to be able to identify them. And that is it for Chapter 7.